Good evening, everybody. Welcome to CWU Live. My name is Marcus Barnett, and I work in the CWU's comms department. I'd like to welcome anybody tuning in with us now or catching up later. Either way, welcome to the show. So, the aim of this meeting tonight, which has been called by our union's Equality, Education and Development Department, is on disability awareness. And given the scale of the crisis unfolding all around us, I think we can all agree that the need for this meeting could not be clearer. Of all of the misery and the stress that all of us have been through these past few months, it's those of us who are disabled who have been hit by the moment the hardest. And I hope that this would be a good forum for us to discuss from a trade union movement perspective how the crisis has hit the disabled community, the impact that this moment has had on the mental health of many of our workers, and how we need to be thinking about the union response to these questions in a serious way. So tonight, joining me on the panel, we're honoured to have Vicky Foxcroft, the Labour Shadow Minister for Disabled People. Also joining us here is Carl Maiden, the union's Assistant Secretary Postal, Tracy Fussy, who sits on the union's NEC, and Mark Anthony Bastiani, who is the NEC's Disability Lead. The speakers will be talking for the next half an hour or so, and then we'll have about 20-25 minutes to discuss things with the panelists. So please, if you're watching from Facebook, please get your questions into the comments box beneath. Vicky, when you're ready.
Okay, brilliant. Well, if I can just start by saying thank you so much for inviting me along this evening. I wasn't intending to talk for too long because I think it's really important that I listen to you, because that helps inform me better about how I do my job and role. But perhaps if I just touch on a few things. So I've done this role since April the 19th. And during that time, we've been at the height of coronavirus. The one thing that I have very much seen is that disabled people seem to be an afterthought when government are doing things, be that in terms of good communication that everybody can understand, particularly the lack of BSL at press conferences and the push to go and get that people being able to access food and online shopping deliveries, or be that the rising and spiraling costs of PPE. And, one of the things we saw at the start of this crisis is that the government realised more people would be claiming universal credit, and they increased it by 20 quid a week instantly. Yet we did not see the same thing happen for legacy benefits such as disability living allowance and PIP. And even now, they haven't made those increases when we've been saying to them time and time again, people are having to pay out more money for the stuff during this crisis. But as we come out of lockdown, and this is very much what I'm really interested in hearing from yous, how are people feeling if they're returning to work? Are they getting the COVID secure workplaces that the government have promised that everybody will be getting? I know the role that you as trade unionists will be playing. And just for a bit of background in terms of myself, before I was an MP, I was proud to work for a trade union for 12 years. It wasn't your union, it was Unite. But I think sometimes on the workers' issues, we don't need to be competing, as trade unions are the same issues. And we have to unite and stand up to the government on these things. So the concerns around whether or not people have gone and got secure workplaces, and how people can tackle that if the employer isn't doing that. And at the heart of that, trade unions will be there raising those issues, supporting employees as they have understandably a lot of anxieties in terms of returning to work, but also whether or not people are being able to get access to work, and whether or not they're getting the other support that they may require to return to work. And then the kind of third thing, and it'd be wrong not to speak about this, and I saw that you had quite a few questions for me on this, but what we'll be getting from a future Labour government, and I can see a few of the questions were about what was promised in the last election and different engagement that you went and had. Well, we are 4.5 years, sadly, away from a potential general election. And so we're taking time to go and work up our policies. But the one thing that we want to be absolutely clear on is that as we do this, we want to do it with disabled people. We want you to be at the heart of our discussions in terms of, what will a new benefit system look like? We've said that we don't think that universal credit works, and that we will be revisiting that. We want to work with you to talk about what that is, but also, is access to work working? Are there areas that we could improve it? Do we want to look to different, systems in terms of going forward? And we think, we know that you have gone and got the answers, and working together, as trade unionists, as disabled people, we can only get better policies by doing that together. I'm absolutely committed to doing that. And I would just finish by thanking you once again for inviting us along this evening. And I'm really looking forward to listening to your comments and questions.
Thank you very much, Vicky. Now on to you, Carl.
Yeah, thanks, Marcus, and good evening, everybody. And I want to start by thanking all our members and reps for the outstanding work that you've been doing through COVID-19. And, as key workers, that the union are extremely proud of all the work that you've done. I want to cover off a couple of points. Basically start with mental health. And during this period, uncertainty creates mental health. And some of the emails that we've got and the inquiries that we've had is that the companies where we represent don't tend to understand that members with mental health do need to be treated differently. So, moving duties at short notice and not having the stability through it. Royal Mail were really slow to react through the COVID when all of this started, which in itself would have created a lot of anxiety, not just in the time it took them to react, but also on making sure that people had the personal protective equipment that was required to do the job. And there's certainly been a lack of empathy and understanding in a lot of areas throughout this. And, we've had a lot of emails into the department. Also, we would have had a lot of our members would have been in the extremely vulnerable category. And that in itself will, exacerbate any sort of mental health conditions. And hopefully when these people, our members, are ready to come back to work, the managers and the companies will take that into account. Unfortunately, we have had some circumstances where we've had to intervene, where managers were threatening people to come back to work, that they needed to come back to work because they didn't believe that, they were ill or sick, and just on the basis that they were shielding. And we've had to intervene quite a lot on that basis. The actual mental health policy that Royal Mail Group have isn't enough. They have a mental health strategy, a 5-year mental health strategy. We have spoken to Royal Mail and said that actually what we want now is a policy, and we are going to be negotiating a policy with Royal Mail so that ensuring that anyone that does suffer or live with mental health, that they will know that they'll be treated properly if they have to be absent from work, or indeed treated properly when they are at work. Our attendance procedure within the Royal Mail Group, management need to take a lot more and train their managers a lot better around dealing with our members who live with mental health. And we are constantly having discussions to ensure that training is done. As a union, we have trained up 12 people who are, and unfortunately COVID got in the way, that we are going to be going out and training our reps, because there's 12 people that have been trained up to go out and deliver Mental Health First Aid England course. And once the COVID is sort of down and we can get back to some sort of normality, we look forward to getting out there and training our reps and giving them the help and the support that they need as well to assist our members going forward. I also want to talk about culture, because it tends to link in, and you know, the culture within Royal Mail towards our disabled members, not just mental health, but with physical disabilities as well. And I don't believe that they get treated as well as they should within the workplace. There's always an element of doubt placed when someone says that they've got a disability. They're not, you know, not taken. It's not taken as face value, and sometimes they have to go forward and prove that. And we've been speaking with the company about that as well, because there's nothing more frustrating than our members having to explain to a new manager what disabilities they have all the time. And we are talking with the company about what we're calling a passport. So if anyone's got adjustments or reasonable adjustments or has a disability, it would be recorded, and therefore, you know, it'll all be, all that information will be in one place. And we're pushing the company to implement that. Where I also believe that Royal Mail Group are not, don't look after our disabled members that well, is also in transfers. You know, deliveries these days are extremely difficult, and sometimes members might need to move on to another job, and getting transfers between functions has been extremely difficult. And also under the attendance procedure, because in a lot of cases, you know, we've had managers Googling what symptoms people should have and how long people should be off, despite the fact that we have occupational health. And you know, that behavior has had to stop. We've put that through, and you know, we've got occupational health. If managers want advice, that's where they should go. But unfortunately, all too often, managers either don't want to or don't feel they have to deal with our members with disabilities. And sometimes that can lead to them being left on an absence or enforced onto an absence. And one of the things that we're going to ensure is that we will make sure that people continue to be correctly looked after in the workplace, and ensure that no one is discriminated against or treated any lesser because they've had a disability. Thanks, Marcus.
Yeah, brilliant, Carl. Thank you very much. And now to you, Tracy.
Thanks, Marcus. I think, you know, if we're talking about the telecoms and financial services of the union, obviously it covers quite a number of employers. And I think what's been really interesting and quite highlights, I think, the difference of approach from employers in terms of how they do view their employees, and also in terms of policies that apply for disabled workers. So we've had to put quite a lot of work in through the various industrial teams, particularly at the early stages of COVID, to make sure that obviously all those policies were being respectful to disabled workers, and that we found that certainly where early engagement with the employer took place, we were certainly getting better results and a better position. I just sort of want to draw, I guess, in terms of Santander, which is obviously a financial services side of the union, and certainly that is an area of membership where I think it's fair to say that there is a lot of engagement goes on, a lot of dialogue between the union and the company, and they didn't move to furlough at all in terms of how they dealt with COVID during the period, and in fact moved to 70% of their workers working from home, which was obviously very helpful, but often then provided a challenge in terms of technology for those people working from home. And they've continually been surveying staff through pulse surveys just to see how people are feeling and what the challenges are. But I think it's, we then look at that perhaps with BT, another large employer that we've got membership in. Once again, we have a relationship with BT where we talk very frequently, and certainly all the way through, though, I think it's fair to say that there was frustrations early stages in terms of actually getting members out of buildings into places that they felt much more safe, i.e. working from home, probably didn't happen as quickly as many people wanted to do so. And we certainly were able to move that to a position that we achieved that within time, and have seen plenty of employees, I think, feeling much more safe and secure having the chance to do that. The difference we've had though in some of the employees is their approach to how they deal with COVID and absences, and COVID related absences in particular. And I think this is where it highlights where inequalities can come in terms of vulnerable people with disabilities, in terms of the financial impact that can happen as a consequence. So where we've got furlough employees that are furloughed, and we've been able to achieve 100% of their pay going to them still. In some other employers, that hasn't been the case, and the employer haven't actually made the differential up. We've been particularly keen to make sure that where employees have been furloughed, that it's certainly not been disabled members that have been furloughed for reasons that would obviously have treated them differently. And so we've had to keep a real close eye on everything that's happening like that. The problems that we've had is, of course, when people are put onto statutory sick pay, which is obviously lower than their normal wages, that there is an issue, as a consequence of that, that may well be treating them differently. And unfortunately, I think in that case, some of our disabled members have fallen within that. So it's been a real challenge overall. Telecoms and financial services, we have got a lot of home workers, but we've also had a lot of people that have still been working out as normal in terms of the normal job, being key workers. And I think the challenges in terms of working at home have been really real, in that certainly some of the ways of working from home have been really challenging in terms of the video conferencing that's taking place, which in some places has been quite disengaging, and it can be very isolating for many people. And Carl's talked quite a lot about the mental health issues that certainly that we deal with in terms of membership, but there has been lots of issues, and I think that still remains a challenge as well in terms of obviously looking after the membership moving forward. I think the other concern that we certainly have is that working from home has been a real enabler for some people, just in terms of their everyday living and life, and domestically, and and being with their families. And in terms of government guidance in terms of returning to work, I think that's going to bring its own challenges, and we're going to have some discussions with the employees in terms of how that's dealt with, because clearly we've got vulnerable people and people that have been now used to working at home, working very productively from home as well, and the challenge of going back to work will bring a lot of anxiety and challenges on top of that. So it's been I think quite a journey through COVID with all of those issues.
Thank you very much, Tracy. And finally to Mark.
Thanks, Chair, and thank you for the opportunity to share my views. Why is disability awareness important? COVID-19 has shown what the implications for our members and their families with a disability can be. The effects can be devastating and can last a lifetime. Some disabilities, health conditions, mean your immune system tends to be lower than a person without a disability or health concern. With our members starting to return to work or have worked through, the need for risk assessments, reasonable adjustments to identify the risk, to put measures in place to protect where possible our members in and outside of the workplace is key. To remember that not all disabilities can be seen, and looking at a person doesn't automatically mean they don't have a disability. Most disabilities occur later in life. We have seen many updates explaining the guidance, some cases 49 plus. The Equality, Education and Development Department sent out a COVID-19 survey. Over 5,000 responded back, which is a positive response and shows that our members are rightly concerned. We need to make sure that all of the companies that we have members in feel that their concerns are being listened to. Why is this important? The consequences if a member does not get the help that they need can be a performance review, can be death, discipline, losing your job, conflict with your colleagues, a disrupted home life, victimization, and bullying. In BT, as you heard, there is a disability passport scheme that should be helping our members to stay safe. Unfortunately, government advice has not always been the best, and with such a new virus, what we know now compared to the start is very different. Some disabilities and groups are at a greater risk. Where there is no disability passport in place, and you heard Carl speak about it now, it has been down to individuals to make the decision. This is where IR reps working with your equality reps, disability leads, health and safety, your branch and your executive come into play to offer support and advice. What is a definition of a disability? You are disabled under the Equality Act 2010, Disability Discrimination Act 1995, the DDA, in Northern Ireland, if you have a physical or mental impairment that has a substantial or long-term negative effect on your ability to do normal daily activities. What is a reasonable adjustment? The duty to make a reasonable adjustment aims to remove the barriers that prevent a person with a disability to integrate fully into the workplace. A reasonable adjustment is also to change or to remove or reduce the effect of the employee's disability so they can do the job. We should also be looking at home, as that you've just heard, with so many working from home now, do we have the right equipment to do the work? Also, to look at timescales. Making a request can take a month, 6 months, a year. In my view, it should be no longer than 3 months from when the request from the start of the request and should be in law. The reasonable adjustment can be the workplace, the way things are done, risk assessments taken from the health and safety executive. As an employer, you must protect people from harm. This includes taking reasonable steps to protect your workers and others from COVID-19. This is called a COVID-19 risk assessment, and it helps you to manage risk and protect people. You must identify work activities or situations might cause transmission of the virus. Think about who could be at risk. Decide how likely is that someone could be exposed. act to remove the activity or saturation, or if this isn't possible, control the risk. Talk to your workforce to provide them with the information. Remember, the higher risk groups can include older males, have a higher body mass index, have a health concern such as diabetes, are from a Black, Asian, and minority ethnic background. Shielding workers. During COVID-19 outbreak, the government has defined some people as clinically extremely vulnerable shielders. Shielding workers are at increased risk of severe illness from coronavirus. They cannot return to work before at least the 31st of July in Scotland, from the 1st of August in England, and from the 16th in Wales, when shielding is paused. And I know Cara has done some great work around this, and I would encourage members to look at the advice. Also, to remember, some people with a disability are unable to wear a face mask for a number of reasons. Thanks for the opportunity to speak today.
Brilliant, Mark. Thank you very much. Before I move on to questions, can I just give a quick thanks to Sarah and Nicola, our BSL interpreters, who are doing a fantastic job. And keep getting your questions in beneath. It's good that we've got over 100 people tuned in to the event tonight. So Vicky, I have two questions for you here. So number one, how does the Equality Act shape up for workers with disabilities? Do you think it can be strengthened in any way? And how do we deal with employers who are continuing coming before employment tribunals for disability discrimination cases? And the second one is, if you're a carer and you start to receive your pension, your caring allowance stops. How is this supposed to help families looking after vulnerable family members? What more support would you like to see for carers? And I have one for Carl also, from somebody who's been shielding since March. They've had no welfare calls off RM. And what should the branches be doing about this? So Vicky, if you'd like to go ahead with that.
Yeah, well, this is one of the frustrations actually about not being in government and being in opposition is, you know, we have to try and influence the Conservatives to be doing more on this stuff. And if anybody kind of follows the things that I've been saying in Parliament, we've been pushing in terms of all of these things. So around the carers allowance and the need to increase it, but actually who manages to receive it, you know, the money that, you know, the state, the economy saves because of, you know, unpaid carers and the work that they do. I think it's 13 billion, but I could be wrong on that figure. And then around the kind of Care Act easements and when the government will be getting rid of them. And we're not getting answers on this stuff. So yesterday, I was able to take place virtually in a petitions debate on these issues and was asking these questions. And I kind of knew that the minister wouldn't be able to answer them. So I suggested that they might want to write to me with the answers because there was a lot of important questions. And I might just point out at this point that I'm actually one of those people that are shielding. I've got rheumatoid arthritis, so the medication I'm on suppresses my immune system. And it's been an absolute disgrace that we had something in Parliament where I could contribute to all of the debates, where I could vote, and then Jacob Rees-Mogg and his buddies decided that it was working too well and got rid of it. So yesterday was my first chance since last time to be able to contribute in a full debate where I could ask all of those questions. And apart from that, I've only been able to contribute in questions and statements, but not in the debates. And to say there's so many important things to raise. that it's actually been extremely frustrating. And I just kind of finished, I might not have directly answered the question, but I've tried to give you a feel in terms of answering it. And if you want me to get you more detailed ones in writing, do feel free to contact me on that. But the irony that I'm the shadow minister for disabled people, and Parliament has excluded us under the Tories from being able to participate when they were able to make those reasonable adjustments to allow me to be able to do so.
Oh, brilliant. Well, thank you very much. And Carl?
Yeah, it's saddening but not surprising, to be honest, Marcus, because whenever anyone is away from work, you know, apart from annual leave, that there is a contact strategy within our agreement, and that the contact should be both ways. And you know, particularly during these times, and it comes back to the link that back into the mental health. You know, we want people to be able to stay part of the workplace, and that contact from the manager can help people, even though they're forced to be off work, to stay part of the workplace, just having a little chat about what's going on, the changes that have been taking place. Because don't forget, some of what the workplace looked like when people went off 12 weeks ago, they could be walking back into a completely different workplace with social distancing, which is why we got the company and forced the company to agree the return to work policy, where people are told in advance, they get used to coming back to work. They get some time to get themselves prepared to come back to work. If you're not in the extremely vulnerable category, you can go and visit the office to see what it looks like before you come back. You then have an interview before you come back to make sure that you know, any adjustments that you need when you come back will be there. And if them adjustments are not in place, do not go back to work. But it's the union that's forced the position of them. You know, Royal Mail were just expecting people to come back at the drop of a hat and pick up where they left off. And you know, there's a lot of work to be done, and I'm sure our reps will be supporting our members, and that's health and safety reps as well as our industrial reps, with these return to work interviews, and ensure that when they go back, the adjustments that are required are there, and that they are the necessary COVID friendly places in the workplace.
Brilliant. Thank you, Carl. So I've got a question for everybody here as well. In fact, no, I'll go for another one from Vicky. Sorry, you're very popular tonight, Vicky. So this is from Steve in London. So with unemployment destined to skyrocket as we come out of COVID-19, some estimates as high as 4 million unemployed, and disabled people will be hit even harder than they have been to date. Trade unions obviously have a massive role to play. What more can we do you think? And this is a question for everybody from Joyce in Scotland. The thought of staff returning to offices is causing anxiety and stress in the members who have been working in offices and buildings since the start of lockdown. Attending and travelling on public transport adds further stress. How do you think we manage these pressures? So go ahead in the first one if you like, Vicky. Maybe tackle the second too.
Yeah, I think it's a really big concern whether or not disabled people are, you know, the higher rate in terms of unemployment. These are one of the questions that I have been asking quite a lot in government. But in terms of the roles that trade unions can play, you know, making sure that where people can get access to work, applying for that, making sure that the you know, the reasonable adjustments are taking place in the workplace, but also challenging employers with unfair practices. And you know, I'm sure, and so I think about my local CWU and the reps there, and I know that they're pretty, you know, fantastic, and are really well trained on stuff to be able to tackle the employers on stuff. So I think, you know, always going and working with, you know, your reps, because that's your kind of, you know, safety really, because they can stand up and speak up, you know, for you as well, to make sure that you're in a strong position. And I know that the CWU is really good in terms of the focus on training the reps to really high standards to be able to do that. But I also think, you know, linking in with, you know, local MPs and councillors about tackling that, because it isn't just, you know, the private sector, but you know, local authorities are quite often big employers in areas, so making sure, you know, that we hold them to account and that they don't have any bad practices, be it bad practices, you know, that might just be taking place because they're not thinking thoroughly enough, and making sure that those conversations and dialogues, you know, are taking place. I loved working for a trade union, I really did. And every time I meet with, you know, trade unions and discuss stuff, it always reminds me how much I kind of missed it, because on a day-to-day basis, the difference that can go and happen can be absolutely massive.
Oh, wonderful. Thanks, Vicky. Tracy, would you like to go next there with the question?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think the question Joyce poses is really important, and certainly within BT, massive employer. And as I've said, a lot of people have been separated from their colleagues. They've been isolated, working at home throughout this pandemic. There's no doubt that you can't just suddenly expect the whole of that population of people that have been working at home that don't normally to just assimilate back into the workplace. And you know, I can see some questions being posed. You know, should there be some sort of risk assessment? Should there be a phased return to work? Well, undoubtedly for some of those employees, that's absolutely a requirement, because we're all very different by nature. So I think yes, absolutely. You know, we're working with the employers in terms of doing workplace risk assessments, making the workplaces COVID secure. Well, we should be doing exactly the same for the employees in terms of their return to work, and deal with the issues that they may well have, and you know, and put some adjustments in place if necessary. And that could be a whole host of different things, from attendance patterns, you know, travelling back on public transport, of course, at different times. You know, all of that brings anxiety and stress and problems for people. And I do think employers need to understand that. But we've got an absolute pivotal role in terms of, you know, supporting our members and delivering that for them.
Thank you. And Mark, would you like to answer that next?
Thanks. I mean, again, just to echo the point that Tracy has made, but do go and get a stress risk assessment, get a COVID risk assessment, and make sure you feel comfortable. Make sure your questions are dealt with, and they're not just moved to one side. And also, as well, at the end of the day, it is your health. You have to think about. In the Equality Act, there are guidelines around people with a disability. They must make a reasonable adjustment. As that we've heard, we've had people working from home. Are they able to work from home? Are they able to work in a different environment if that they want to for a short term? Because again, the risk is still out there, and you know this virus has caused a lot of sorrow, a lot of hurt. And we wanted to make sure that our members, no matter what job, what organisation that they are in, is that they are given the full protection. Thank you.
And Carl, would you like to?
Yeah, the work that our members do within the CWU actually links the country together, and you know, I think the appreciation for telecoms and postal workers throughout COVID has gone up. You know, the public love that, but I think that we have to do more than just in the workplaces. We have to go out and be part of society and build the community to make sure that people aren't isolated. supporting not just our members, but our members' families and friends. And we've started that as a union. This week, we've just started the CWU family package coming out, and there's been so many cuts over the years, not just through COVID, and first of all, it's the working class that get hit harder there, and then the disabled people with disabilities get hit even harder. So we have to be there and try and fill some of that void and support people out in the communities and out in society.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. So I have even more questions coming through. We're now on 2,500 people watching. So if you just tuned in, enjoy it. I hope you go back and watch even more. So Tracy, here's a question for you. So in relation to the protection and approach of the employers under the TNFS umbrella, how do you think they've coped with the COVID-19 pandemic? And what do you think have been the main concerns for your members?
Right, okay, all right. Obviously, lots of employers, as I've said. So, I'm going to talk broadly here without singling, I guess, anyone out. It's, I think for most of our members, and they cut across, telecoms workers, facilities workers, fleet, financial services, catering. So there's a whole, variety of different types of members that we've got from different industries and employers. I think the challenges that we've been dealing with are particularly around the safety of people at work and getting the right risk assessments in place for them to carry out their job safely, ensuring that employers are actually responding to the concerns that are being raised. I think certainly on the early days of the pandemic, I think a lot of employers were particularly slow in terms of responding, and some were certainly better than others across our constituency, the sector that we work in. So, and as I said earlier, it particularly highlights where you have good engagement and dialogue with the employer. I think we've been able to sort of make better inroads into, the safeguards that our members are looking for. It's been particularly challenging, I think, around some of the buildings where we've got, obviously lots and lots of people working in one building. Getting those people to provide the social distancing that was obviously required was challenging. In some cases, it was proven quite difficult to achieve that. Hence, we did get the move to home working, and certainly in BT, which certainly took away a lot of the worries and concerns and stress that members were feeling. So it's all of that kind of thing. I think that the main issues now are certainly about the return to work. If you're moving from a home environment back into the work environment, what does that look like? What's it going to feel like? And how are the employer, going to deal with that? And likewise, we've got still a lot of the employees who have been working who are suddenly going to be, faced with a lot of their colleagues now returning back in the buildings as well. And obviously that's bringing its own challenges, because there's a lot of fear and anxiety in terms of will the employers, will they be able to maintain all the things that in terms of COVID and the requirements are going to give them. So there's all of that. It's been continual. So some employers have certainly been much more proactive in terms of looking after their employees and keeping regular contact and, I think putting the policies in place to look after them.
Thank you very much. Now I've got a question for you now, Carl. So what do you think is the standout achievement for the CWU in terms of our efforts to protect postal workers during the pandemic? And what has been the most difficult memory for you personally?
The standout achievement, I think, is pushing Warmer Group to a position that we have, because, as I've said earlier, they were really slow off the mark around a lot of it. And our reps and members in the local workplaces standing up when they felt things weren't right, and ensuring that the proper PPE, social distancing, is there. So I'm quite proud of us as a union for achieving that. Most difficult memories, there's a couple actually. It's every time that you've we were hearing that we had members passing away through COVID-19, and from a sort of personal position, within our department, it's when you know that someone needs help and you're speaking to an employer that doesn't want to go the full distance to support them, and that can be quite frustrating and disappointing. But overall, we've lost a number of members through COVID-19, and the union are looking to do something as a permanent memorial to them. That's probably one of the most difficult, and knowing that members are struggling and we're doing what we can, and sometimes the employer's not working with us to go the whole 9 yards to make sure that they can be as protected as possible.
Thank you, Carl. So bringing on to what you were saying earlier, Vicky, there's lots of discussion here in the chats about what exactly would a Labour government have done differently. So a question which people seem to be asking is, what do you think that a Labour government, if Jeremy Corbyn or Keir Starmer would have been Prime Minister, would have done differently doing with, specifically, say, on shielding and disabled people, in comparison to the way the Tories have handled it?
Yeah, and it's one of those where, Keir's really gone to say we'll support the government where they're doing things right, and we'll question them where they're not, also hold them to account on that stuff. I mean, on shielding, I think none of us would say that the communication has been anything other than poor. For those who are shielding, the announcement, I think at 10 p.m. on a Saturday night, from a minister tweeting to say you can now go out for a walk when you've been in your home for weeks and months, not having the ability to go outside. And everybody wanted to hear from the scientific advisors. So if you're going to start with the stuff around the scientific advisors, and obviously we're not privy to all of that information, but you really have to follow the evidence. So one thing that I've been pushing for is for government to look at, particularly if there's a second wave, having an hour shielded walk. If you're only going out with other people who are shielded during that hour, or who are choosing to shield themselves, because don't forget, you've got the list of those that are shielding, but additional people who have felt their risks quite high, so have chosen to shield, but you're not going to catch anything off those people because they haven't been in contact. And I think that would give people more trust and faith. I think right throughout this, the government have been very slow, and we've consistently said that, they were slow to lock down. They were slow in terms of the information. They've been slow in terms of the test, track and trace. They were slow in terms of procuring PPE. They were slow in terms of recognising the crisis that was in our care homes. They were slow in terms of recognising the excess deaths in terms of people with autism and learning difficulties. So I think we would have gone to respond, definitely far quicker. And there's a lot of people who've fallen through the holes in terms of the different packages that government have had. And we would be looking to go and deal with stuff like that much quicker. But also in terms of legacy benefits, we would have upgraded them at exactly the same time as universal credit. There might have been delays in terms of the system, but we'd have gone to go and put that into play straight away, because it's obviously one of those things that's just only right to do that if you can do it to universal credit. I could probably go on ages about this, but I'll just leave it there on that.
Well, we've actually just got two questions there about universal credit. Would the Labour Party scrap universal credit?
Yeah, so this is one of the things that we're looking into at the moment. So whether or not you can just scrap all of the machinery, but what we're doing is we're really kind of looking into what benefit system we would put in place. And part of that is making sure that we really work this up and that we get it right, and that we don't cause more distress to people in terms of doing that. So it's very important to us to be working with disabled people on how we go and get this right, because we know that the chop and changes to the system are a really big challenge. And also for a lot of disabled people, or you say the DWP, and they're full of fear and dread. And so how we manage to create a system that supports people when they need it, but also helps people when they're wanting to get back into work, but they know that it's a genuine help, rather than the kind of sanctions type regime that's there at the moment.
Wonderful, thanks for that, Vicky. Really, really interesting. I'm aware that it's been, a very, very information heavy, but very informative and at times quite emotional talk here. So I'm going to suggest that we wrap it up after this question addressed to Mark, which is, why do you think, as a trade unionist, Disability Awareness Day is so important?
Thanks, Marcus. I think to me, it's the inequalities, and it's the stigma and the stereotypes that we as a person with a disability face. It is for me, and one of my roles that I try to do is how that we get our union to better monitor our membership. How do we get people to feel comfortable and feel confident enough to actually put on the form or to update the form that they have a disability? Yeah, if it's a hidden one, we need to understand what our fabric of our union is. We can only help and to improve things the more information we get. And having Disability Awareness Day highlight the fact is that we are not different. We can do just as much. We just need a adjustment at times, sometimes nothing at all. And for people to understand, it's not being treated differently. It's being treated as we should be, as an equal member of society. Thank you.
Brilliant, Mark. Thank you very much, and thank you to all of the speakers from joining in. Thank you, Carl, Tracy, Mark, Vicky, and very, very special thanks to our sign language interpreters today. Make sure to keep in touch with the union. We run talks like this all the time. All you need to do is go on Twitter, CWU News, follow the Communications Union on Facebook, and I hope you enjoyed this very much. I know I certainly did. And tune in again soon. Thank you very much. Bye.